Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for August 2, 2022, the We Are the Champions edition. We begin with that story, a little bit off our normal compliance story, but when you have an English wife, you celebrate any England football victory, and England's women's team brought it home in the Euro 2022 victory. Ian Drake, or Dark rather, writing in ESPN.com, said that it has changed the face of women's football, and it's only the start. So congrats to the Lionesses, a big win, and you certainly made my wife very happy. Also from the sports world, and a not so great or as positive a story, is the impartial umpire in the Deshaun Watson hearing has made a recommendation of a 6-game suspension for Watson. So 25 women accusers of sexual assault, and he gets a 6-game suspension. The steps that will happen now are the league, or either side has the opportunity to appeal this, both the league or the NFL Players Union. The Players Union says, of course, they will accept this penalty and respect the process. Now it's up to the NFL. Of course, if the NFL objects, guess who makes the decision? NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. How does that sound for a fair process? At any rate, looks like the Cleveland Browns made the smart move, and Deshaun Watson skates with a 6-game sentence, or suspension rather. Next up from Reuters. ESG, what directors and officers need to know about insurance. Before that happens, you need to understand how D&O liability insurance will protect your personal assets, and consider whether a company's D&O policies include appropriate provisions to address ESG risks. So this is not about ESG insurance, but about D&O coverage for directors and officers who inevitably be sued over ESG issues. And finally, from Dovetail Press, billed as open access to scientific and medical research, a first-time contributor to the Daily Compliance News, we have a paper from a fellow, person in China, Yuji Zhang, from the School of International and Public Affairs in Shanghai. And the topic is the relationship between corruption, perception, and depression. In an extraordinarily interesting paper, the author finds that an increase in corruption perception can aggravate depression. Trust in government, it partially mediated from the effect of corruption perception on depression, and that trust in government and online news consumption are 2 important mediators between corruption, perception, and depression. I admit I'd never thought about the correlation between the two, but there may be one out there. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.